After World War I, America's economy was on the rise. It was a time of flappers, great musical achievement, fun novelty events, economic growth, sports, alcohol, and fun. The early 1900s were truly enjoyed by all, but the consistent increase in alcohol consumption was seen as a problem in America's society. The government eventually sided with the two big supporters of Prohibition, the Anti-Saloon League and the Women's Christian Temperance Union. The government decided to ban alcohol instead of restricting it, which would prove to be a daunting task. Alcohol was so heavily embedded into society prior to the Prohibition movement, with the government abruptly banning alcohol, it would create an uproar in society. On January 16, 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified to the Constitution. The overall goal was to lower the consumption of alcohol in the United States. Many problems arose throughout the Prohibition movement, but the goal was eventually met. The question is, at what cost? The Prohibition movement created more problems than it solved. This statement can be proven easily because of the abundance of problems and only few positive outcomes. Loopholes in the 18th Amendment allowed for ways around the law. Law enforcement and court systems struggled to keep their integrity while maintaining control during Prohibition. Protests and violence frequently broke out. People continued to consume alcohol by either producing it themselves or purchasing from gangsters. Prohibition created disrespect for the law. Cigarettes also became more popular because they were trying to find something to replace alcohol. The Prohibition movement was expensive, and the nation's revenue decreased because it could no longer tax the sale of alcoholic products. Economically, Prohibition had a negative effect on the United States. The only positives that came out of Prohibition were the decrease in alcohol consumption, and it improved the well-being of Americans. This certainly proves that the Prohibition movement created more problems than it solved. The most interesting thing I learned through my research was the 18th Amendment, despite being the foundation of the Prohibition movement, had many problems. Although the main objective of the Prohibition movement was to lower the consumption of alcohol, the 18th Amendment failed to set regulations on the drinking of alcoholic beverages. The 18th Amendment went into effect a year after the ratification, which allowed people to stock up on legal alcohol. Also, the Volstead Act allowed alcohol consumption if a doctor prescribed it. Doctors freely prescribed alcohol, a lot even in situations where it was not needed, because it gave them consistent patients. The poorly constructed documents allowed for ways around the law. The problems with the Prohibition movement started before it even began. Prohibition changed our country in a few ways. Prohibition was probably not the most effective way to handle the alcohol consumption issue, but it was the first major restriction of alcohol. Also, alcohol's dangers were first noted as a problem by the government and have evolved into our current laws for alcohol. Also, the poor laws created during the Prohibition movement can be looked on as a learning experience and can influence current laws our country makes.